I'm going to show you how I take a marquetry piece like this flower right here and take it out of this background and put it in a new background. Stay tuned. I'm working on a marquetry commission that I've been working on for the past couple weeks, and now I'm pretty much finished with all the standard marquetry stuff. It's these 4 flowers here. I've done them separately, and last night I finished up doing some of the finer details on these, and now I'm finished with the marquetry, or rather the very beginnings of this. And I wanted to pause and do a video because I want to show you what I have to do next. Now, if you take a look here, you can see I have these 4 flowers. Each of them is in a different veneer. And if you look up here, you'll see the piece that I am trying to recreate. This is actually 4 different pieces that have been put together in one image, but I am actually going to be making this into one piece that's roughly looks like this. And one thing that you will notice immediately about this versus what I have down here is the background for all of these flowers is quite different from the background of the flowers up here. Up here, these appear to be pine boards, and I'm pretty sure that's what they are, that are just lightly edge joined together, and then the flowers are metalwork that's been put on top. On here, these are actually quite nice bird's eye maple veneers, and then this is a pretty crummy maple veneer. Now, the reason why this is like this is because when I'm working on a large piece or something that I know is going to take quite a long time, and I'm going to have starting and stopping, and I'm going to work on it here and I'm going to work on it there, I know that these veneers are going to be tossed around quite a bit. I'm going to do a couple things in them that might cause the background veneer to get damaged, stuff like that. So because of that, what I'll tend to do is basically make my pattern in a veneer that I know I'm going to toss later. So right here, these maple veneers that I'm working in, I just thought of them as my working canvases, okay? And now what I'm going to do is go ahead and create my final backgrounds, and then I can drop the images here into my final backgrounds, and everything will be nice, and I can toss these working veneers that I was working in. This one right here is already cracked at the top, so it's a good thing that I wasn't working in my final veneer for this. So in order to create this background, what I have done is I have taken a bunch of strips of maple veneer. This is torrified maple, and the reason why I'm using this is because if I use pine, I wouldn't be able to get this color. I get the color a lot better with this maple. This has been torrified, so it's roasted. It gets that nice dark brown. And when I made this veneer, what I did was I cut a long and wide strip of maple veneer, much wider and longer than this, and then I just cut them into individual strips. And the way that I did that was I took my marking gauge. This is my favorite marking gauge made by Mass Woodworks. The reason why I like this is it's a knife cutter. And I set this to roughly the width of the strip that I was looking for, okay? Set it down, and then I took my larger sheet of maple veneer and held it up at the edge of my bench, and then just lightly scored one side of that along the grain. You can't go deep. If you go deep, that knife will not follow the edge. It'll follow the grain line, and you'll go off your fence. So do it lightly on one side, flip it over, do it lightly on the other, deepen those lines if you have to, and then you can snap off a strip. Then what you'll have to do is joint that edge, because that edge will be nowhere near glue ready. You can just take a hand plane that has a square side, not this one, and just hold it on your bench. Use something to elevate your veneer, and then pass it over, and then just joint that edge. It's really not that tough. Now what I can do is take these strips and just edge join them together. But I'll want to do one additional piece of prep work before I do that. Now, sometimes when I'm looking to get a wider sheet of veneer and I don't want to cut a wide sheet of veneer because it can be tough to cut a wide sheet of veneer. You need to have a good bandsaw blade. You know, everything has to be set up. It's pretty easy to cut a sheet of veneer off something like a turning blank. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll take the rift or quartered face of a turning blank and cut off sheets of veneer just like this, and then edge join them together, and since it's rift or quartered, you won't be able to tell that they're multiple strips that have been edge joined. In this one, I want to show that there are multiple strips here because of those slight gaps in between the pine boards on the original piece. So if I took this and I just joined it together like this, you probably wouldn't be able to see those the differences in the strips just because the grain is so straight here. So what I'll do is I'll first figure out which face of these veneers I want to show. And, you know, it doesn't really make much of a difference with these because they all look pretty much the same. And then with each show face facing up, what I'll do is just take a block plane and lightly chamfer the edges here. Just a little bit, just maybe 3 swipes per side. And what I'm doing is just slightly taking off the edge on the top of the veneer. These are 1/16 of an inch thick, so there's enough meat left on that edge where I can still glue these sheets together, or strips together rather, and everything will be fine. But visually, I'll be able to show kind of a gap on the top. So with those all chamfered, and you can see those, it looks like that. If you can see, there's basically shadow lines here. So now what I'm going to do, and I've tested this out a few times to figure out what the best method is here, and there really is no great way of doing this, but it's not that big of a deal, is I will lay them out like this with the non-show face facing up, and I'm going to take a long strip of tape and put one end on my bench, okay, making sure this tape is going to span over all these, and then I'll press it down on the first one here, and with the first one engaged, I can kind of line up these other ones and stretch this piece of tape across, and that'll act as kind of a clamp holding those together. And since it's clamped on my bench on both sides, this will not do that fun fold-up thing that can happen. So with that first one done, the second one's a lot easier, and I'll just make sure that I'm really stretching this tape across, okay, before I press it down on my bench like that. And now with those two stretched on like that, I can stretch tape along the seams now. A lot of tape involved here, but you know, whatever, I guess. I don't know. People waste worse things all the time. I'll save gasoline or something. Okay. So now all those seams have been taped, so I can release this from my bench, and I'm just going to cut that a bit because there's no need. And this will want to curl up on me, of course, and that's a good sign because that means those joints are nice and tight. You can see it right there, and I'm going to put a little tight bond along those joints, just opening them up, and because I have that tape along that seam, everything's going to stay together just fine. Just going to use a little bit. Doesn't really matter that I use a ton, and it's because of how I'm using this in this project, but you know, if you need to do this for something else, you'll want to make sure you use a good amount of glue to get in there and create a actual joint. Okay, so now I've gotten enough glue in there, and here, this is quite simple now. I can just take a piece of tape that is longer than the width of this panel and press down and wait for this thing to dry. But before I wait for it to dry, what I want to do is take off all this excess glue on top. Now, I know people are going to say, why didn't you do this from the other side, blah, blah, blah. Well, I've done this a few times now, and there's just no great way of doing this. You can see I have an issue with the glue now, but whatever. Folded piece of sandpaper goes right in those gaps, or not gaps, but that chamfer in between those strips, and that'll take care of the glue right there. No problem. Now, I'm going to wait for this one to dry, but I have already gone ahead and prepped two of these. This one is now drying on the bench, just like this one is. This one I prepared a while ago. You can see there I have those nice shadow lines. There's still a little glue on here. What I'm going to do is sand this lightly, and then I'm going to show you how I will take, let's say, this one and drop it in with Marquetry. I'll meet you over at the donkey. All right, so here I am back at my donkey. I have this flower here. I have gone ahead and surfaced it a bit with sandpaper, and I also have this new background here, which I also have surfaced a bit with sandpaper, and I've gone ahead and cleaned up those grooves a little bit. There, you can see them. There, they're pretty prominent. They'll get more prominent once I oil this whole thing up. So now what I want to do is drop this flower here into this background. Now, from previous videos of me doing marquetry, you've probably only ever seen me taking pieces that I have cut from the bottom veneer and inserted them into a void in the top veneer. And that is really helpful when you're working with like a pattern where you draw a picture on your field veneer and then you insert veneers into it. You need to see your pattern that you're working on. Well, for this one, I want to drop the image here into here. So if I put this on the bottom and then tried to cut it to fit from behind into here, you can see how that's kind of impossible. So what I need to do instead is have this piece drop down into this one. And it's fairly simple. If you've seen me work before, you know that I tilt my table to the left to get that bevel. And when I'm inserting pieces from behind, I cut in a clockwise direction because that causes me to have a bevel that flares outward. What I need now is a bevel that flares inward. So what I'm going to do is cut in a counterclockwise direction. It's fairly straightforward. The same thing applies, or same ideas as cutting the other way apply here. It's no different. So I'm just going to make sure that this is nice and taped down so nothing shifts on me, because shifting would be a big problem here. Another thing I should mention here before I get started is that I intentionally made it so that the background maple, meaning that darker maple that I'm going to be dropping this flower into, is actually slightly thinner than 1/16 of an inch. So this flower is 1/16 of an inch. The background it's going into is less than 1/16 of an inch, but I'm still going to be cutting at my normal angle. And what that's going to do is cause this flower to sit a little proud of the background, which is intentional because I want it to mimic that original project. And that's like kind of a piece of metal that's on top of wood. Well, I don't want to just put this on top of the wood here. I want it to fit in there like an inlay or double bevel marquetry, but I want it to sit proud of the surface, and that's how I'm doing that. So for this, I need to do a starter hole. Actually, I'm going to give myself a new drill bit. Is there a drill bit in here? There is. Fantastic. And when I do my starter hole here, the same principles apply as any other starter hole I cut, which is I want to make sure that I'm entering the waist sections of both veneers. Now, it's a little different when I'm dropping a veneer from the top down, in that I need to locate my hole differently, but the angle is the same and the principle's the same. So in this top veneer, anything outside this flower is waste, right? And anything underneath this flower in the bottom veneer is waste. So what I need to do is make sure that my drill bit enters both of those sections. So I'm going to put my drill bit right here. You can see it's in the maple on here, not this sumac. And I'm going to angle it so that it enters the darker maple underneath this flower, right underneath the flower, which is a waste section. So, let me see if you can see that. There's nothing to see there. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, if you could see where this flower is located on the back side here, you'd see that the hole is inside of it, which is what we want, because we're going to be throwing that section of veneer away. So I'm going to go ahead and thread my saw from behind, just like any other cut. And now, just instead of cutting clockwise, of course, break the blade, but that's no big deal. I probably should use a new blade there anyway. But what I was going to say was, instead of cutting clockwise, I just need to cut counterclockwise. Now, if you are accustomed to doing an entire project where you're cutting clockwise and then you change to counterclockwise like I am about to do right now, it can be a bit jarring at first and it can mess with your brain. So it's just a good idea to, I don't know, get in the headspace where you fully acknowledge that that's what you're doing. So as I cut here, and it's a little tough to get that blade started. Ooh, boy. You can see that I have started this outside of where I should have. I'm cutting away a bit of that sumac, unfortunately, which is not what I wanted to do, but it doesn't matter. And the reason why it doesn't matter is because I am able to reestablish the border of this flower if I want to, okay? And what that means is I have already established kind of the border of this flower when I put it in the backer veneer, or the original canvas veneer that I was working out of. And I didn't need to do that. That wasn't entirely necessary. I could have left these things as blobs and just established those borders right now. But I figure it was good enough practice. So when I cut this out, yes, I am trying to follow the border that I already established, but I'm also able to correct any issues I had before. Now I'm going to change this blade because this blade is not tracking well. That's why I got off track in the beginning, is something's up with that blade. And I want to keep this recording because that is a useful tip to give folks. If you notice that your blade just isn't going in the direction that you need it to, or your sawing is a little harder than it normally is, it's time to throw out the blade and get a new one, okay? So that's just what I did right there, and let's see how this one feels. Yeah, this one feels a lot better. I could tell right when I started that cut, if you go back and watch my cutting on that, you could see I was struggling a bit, and I don't know what happened. Something was up with that blade. So again, I'm just establishing this border again, and my saw does want to go in where I cut before, okay? And the reason why is because there is a little bit of a, gap or spot where my blade can wedge itself in there. So even though it may seem like I'm doing this entire flower a second time, it's a lot easier this time. And again, I didn't need to establish all of these petals entirely. And you can see I'm deviating a bit just because, I can. But I didn't need to establish all of these to be perfectly cut like this on the outer perimeter, because I could have just waited until this very end. So it's all about how much work you feel like doing at whatever point and how efficient you want to be. But I don't know. I just like seeing the flowers come together. Okay, I'm going to stop yapping now, and so I can fast forward through this and you won't miss anything. Okay. Push that over like that. Oh, I don't know why I put that there. So I need this. I can go ahead and take off that bird's eye maple on the top here. It's a shame I had to use that for the canvas here, but there's still a lot of usable bird's eye on this sheet. You know, even though there's a big flower-shaped hole in there, I can still use that, right? Something. And then there's my, oh, Jeebus. There's my maple flower background, and then there's the flower itself. Now, hopefully this fits in here and sits just a tad proud, and it looks like it's doing just that. That's pretty much exactly what I was going for, so happy with that. And yeah, that's how you take a marquetry piece, do it in a background that you work out of, just so that you can have it ready to drop into something more final later. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something.